Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Golf and Politics. Special episode tonight. This is Monday, November 4th. Tomorrow is Election Day 2024, and we have a special guest with us tonight, former state representative in Oklahoma, Democratic State Representative Jason Dunnington. Jason, thanks for joining us. Rob was supposed to do the show with me today. Some things come up, and I know that you'll fill in well for him. And let's just...
I'm the better golfer, apparently.
Now, you're going to make him mad with that one. I can promise that.
He was
I promise that. But, let's just put the cards on the table. Rob was clearly going to predict that Kamala Harris is going to roll President Trump. He's pretty bullish on Harris's chances to win tomorrow. But let's just get quick into it. Jason, who's your choice to win tomorrow? Who do you think pulls it out on Election Day?
Well, look, I tried to compare myself to Rob and his golfing abilities, which is clearly not the case. You all have seen on the podcast that I'm not nearly as good as he is. But I'm lockstep with him on his pick here. I think Vice President Harris wins it. I think she wins it going away. I think she wins all of the northern states and maybe even one of the two sunshine states. So I don't even think it's going to be close.
And I obviously going to take the other view. I think Trump will win tomorrow. We'll get into our reasons for that. And somebody the other day said, I think Trump's going to win in a landslide. And I just don't think that's possible. And I don't think it's possible for Harris to win in a landslide. I think regardless of the outcome tomorrow, which, let's be honest, we're probably not going to know the outcome till later in the week. Look, regardless of the outcome, the country's still going to be divided. It's still going to be polarized. We're going to have a difficult time. I think whoever wins, I think there's going to be unrest in some ways, and I hate to predict that, but the rhetoric that we're seeing from both sides already, it's not setting up for a real wonderful week. So let's hope I'm wrong on that. But before we get into the presidential race, let's talk about the U.S. Senate race. Jordan, why don't you give us the U.S. Senate map? This is going to be interesting because regardless who wins the presidency, who controls Congress is totally in play. And the Republicans had a very favorable map. The state of West Virginia, represented by Democrat Joe Manchin for years. He is not seeking re-election. Governor Jim Justice is going to roll in that race. I've seen polling that he's up by even close to 30 points in the state. So West Virginia solidly in the red column. That's a pickup for Republicans. And I think, frankly, Montana is going to go to the Republicans. John Tester, who's done a great job holding a seat in a state like Montana for many years, I think he's finally up against a really good candidate, the great business background and military background. And Tim Sheehy, I believe, picks up Montana. You agree with that, Jason, or what are you hearing from your circles?
Look, Tester's won a couple times. Montana's tough. It's just not a lot of people. And so, not being on the ground up there, I don't know what their ground game looks like. But, my feeling would be Montana would be a lot like West Virginia used to be, in the sense that, Manchin was a Democrat in a blood red state, but he kept winning because people knew him. I don't know if Tester has that same appeal. I don't know how much the Trump effect, pulls Sheehy in Montana. I mean, I totally agree with you. West Virginia's gone. Senate Democrats probably should have done a little bit better job of not kicking Manchin out the door. When it comes to that seat.
I don't think that Joe Manchin would have held the seat this time. I think the state had finally flipped. Well, what people don't understand about West Virginia, while it's ruby red today, when I grew up in West Virginia, when I was a kid, there was 30 out of 34 state senators, there was 33 Democrats and one Republican. The only reason there was one Republican because she was appointed by a Republican governor who only won because the Democrat who won the primary that year was so far to the left that the labor unions backed the Republican. I mean, this was a labor union, hardcore Democratic state for many, many years. And it began to really flip in 2000 when George W. Bush beat Al Gore there, which really West Virginia was, everyone talks about the hanging chads, but those 5 electoral votes in 2000 got the election for President Bush, in my opinion. And so
we're getting a history lesson on West Virginia here.
That's right.
For the election. So we got Matt going on this deal.
If you can see by my head there, it says country roads take me home. It's Love that. I love that place, and it is. Even though I live more in Oklahoma than I do West Virginia will always be home. But yeah, that's that state. Manchin would have struggled, I believe, with Trump on the ballot to hold that seat. I think that's why he didn't run for re-election. So if Montana and West Virginia go, then if everything else holds serve, then the Republicans maintain control. But we have some interesting states to look at. Senator Bob Casey in Pennsylvania. Let's start there. Trump and Harris, every poll I've seen, it's a dead heat tie.
Yeah.
But I've yet to see a poll where McCormick has pulled ahead of Bob Casey. Bob Casey's been in office for a long time. He's more of a common sense Democrat, in my opinion. I think there's some probably swing voters that he's able to win over that maybe a more liberal candidate could not. I think McCormick should have been on the ballot 2 years ago. He might have had a better chance of beating Fetterman. I have a tough time believing that McCormick can beat Bob Casey in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, well, believe it or not, there are a lot of us common sense Democrats out here. So, good on us for that. I agree with you.
Other than the fact that you're voting for Kamala Harris, but we'll just.
Well, I haven't voted yet. I'm voting. So, I'm going to take my son just turned 18 2 weeks ago, and so
that's great.
His first ever election to vote in. So he's going to meet me at the house at 6:30 in the morning. We're going to go get in line and try to be some of the first in the door at 7 to vote together for his first election. Pretty cool. So
my son's missing it by just a couple of weeks. He turns 18 on the 27th.
Yeah,
of November.
All of Luca's buddies are in that same boat. They're turning 18 here in a couple weeks, and they're like, "Oh, it's so cool you get to vote." I just love that they're all talking about it.
That's great.
I mean, I've been taking Luca to vote with me since he was a baby, so he was going to get a smack on the head if he didn't go vote. But the fact that he wanted to go do it together, I thought was pretty cool.
So hey, we both let's see if we can come up with a map that we agree on here. Jordan, go ahead and change Pennsylvania to blue, and let's move
I just
on.
Think in that, like the incumbent, if McCormick's never polled ahead of him, incumbents are hard to beat no matter what. And never having polled ahead. I mean, Tester was the incumbent in Montana, but he's been polling behind for months. So there's that. Okay, Pennsylvania goes blue.
Goes blue. Okay, so
Ohio's a tough one. Because
let's go to Ohio.
You're in one of those cases where the Democrat is the incumbent running for re-election, but Ohio, the last 3 cycles has, gone Republican +8, +10, something like that. But Sherrod Brown is just well known and, liked by the unions there. I think liked by, kind of some of the rural Ohioans. So,
well, what people don't realize about Sherrod Brown is he a longtime House member. Before that, he was statewide office holder in Ohio, Secretary of State. He is an incredible politician. I lived in Ohio for many years, worked in Ohio, still do a lot of work in Ohio. And it's interesting. Ohio used to be the battleground state. I mean, that's where it was exciting to be a young operative living in Ohio because we always had such rough and tumble general elections. It's become much more red over the past few years, the rural parts of the state. There were many rural areas that were Union Democrats, very similar to West Virginia, that have now become ruby red, and then the cities are Democratic. And so it's a state that's probably, like you said, going to go 8 to 10 points for Trump. If anybody can pull it out with trailing the top of the ticket, it's Sherrod Brown. And that's not to take anything away from Bernie Moreno. I think he's a great candidate. Now, everything I'm hearing on the ground is that Moreno has a lot of momentum. I am doing some U.S. House races in Ohio, and I'm seeing that momentum in the polling in those districts. I believe it's going to be really close, but I have a hard time believing for Brown to win. He's going to have about 500,000 people in Ohio vote for him and President Trump.
Yeah,
and I just don't see that happening in this election. So I think Ohio is going to go red.
Oh, really?
I think,
he's going to lose.
I really do. I think Moreno wins. Moreno wins the seat. And what's interesting, if Trump wins, then you're going to end up having 2 brand new U.S. senators from Ohio. But I think that Moreno ends up winning by a comfortable margin over a point. I don't think it's going to be. I think Sherrod Brown's days are done. I think Ohio's just become too red.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm sticking with Brown. I think he holds it out.
Okay, so we'll keep that one gray. Jordan, we disagree there. Well, Jason, moving to the state up north from Ohio, Michigan, I think I'll probably agree with you here because I'm guessing that you're going to believe that state stays blue. Former Congressman Mike Rogers is a great member of Congress, in my opinion. I just don't think he has the firepower to win this seat. I think this is a state that I'm going to predict that Donald Trump wins Michigan. We'll get into that later, but I think if he does, it's going to be absolutely razor close. I don't see Rogers having the firepower to win Michigan, so I'm going to go ahead and say that state should stay blue.
I think it goes blue. I think Whitmer's definitely, been out on the stump in her own state working hard for, Harris and the Senate candidate. So I do agree with you. I think it's going to be razor thin in all three of those up there, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. But kind of feel like that maybe the top of the ticket drags that one across.
All right, so Michigan stays blue. I think Wisconsin, we're in the same thing. I think it's a coin flip in Wisconsin. I really do. I think how the presidential campaign goes, so goes the Senate race. Every polling number that I've seen, that they're neck and neck as far as Hovde is right behind Trump. I mean, they're neck and neck together. So if Trump wins, I think he brings Hovde across the line. He seems to be a good candidate. I'm not involved in that race at all, but everything that I've seen online, I've read about the race, I honestly think this state's a coin flip.
Both the candidates, both the top of the ticket, have spent a lot of time in Wisconsin. They're working hard for those electoral, votes. And I tend to agree. I just think it goes the way that the ticket will go on the top. And I think Harris wins Wisconsin by a small margin. So I would say that Wisconsin goes blue for the Senate.
Moving along, I have not seen any polling that has Sam Brown. Now, let's go to Nevada. I haven't seen any polling that has Sam Brown ahead. The closest I've seen him is 3 or 4 points down, and I'm not exactly sure why his campaign hasn't caught fire. I'm not involved in it and all. This is just an outsider's view looking in. He's got an incredible story and resume, but for whatever reason, just doesn't seem to be catching fire out there. And look, I could be wrong here, and he could pull it out because I do believe Trump will win Nevada, but I'm going to believe that Nevada stays blue.
Yeah, I think so too. Early on, he seemed like he was getting some traction, and then he just kind of plateaued, and he stayed there. He never came off the plateau. So.
And continuing on the depressing news for Republicans, I don't think we're going to win Arizona.
You guys picked a terrible candidate.
Well,
Arizona.
Yeah, potentially. I have some very good friends working for her, and they believe that they have a chance, and they're fighting their tails off. And I would love to be wrong here, but I was really shocked. The one poll I saw that had her really close within a margin of error also had Trump up 6 or 7. And while I believe Trump will win Arizona going away, I don't believe he's going to win by 6 or 7 in Arizona. So I'm going to believe that Arizona stays
what I
red.
heard you just say there, Matt, was
stays blue. I mean,
you had friends that were working for that campaign that think that they can get there. What you did not say was that they think that she's a good candidate, because she is not a good candidate.
Well, yeah,
had the
not a lot of crossover appeal. Let's just put it that way.
Had the Republicans put up a normal person in Arizona, I think they beat Ruben Gallego.
Because Gallego has some serious problems. I mean, there's no question about it. But so does Kerry Lake. That's the issue.
Yeah. So I'm saying Arizona goes blue.
I'm sure you've been in Arizona during campaign time. Have you ever seen a state that likes yard signs and signs on every street corner like Arizona? It's crazy. I was out there like a month ago. I've never seen more signs anywhere. I mean, we're talking like homemade 4x8s on every street corner.
Yeah.
Special messages.
They
have to do real hard work to get those stakes in the ground out there too. Because it's like pounding into concrete.
I mean, they're real into arts and crafts out there, I guess. And so they really get into their signs.
Now, you don't believe Texas can actually flip, do you?
No, I don't. I was just down there. I took Luca down there to play. Speaking of, throwing a little golf into your golf and politics. I took him down there for his 18th birthday 2 weeks ago, and we played the Woods Fazio course. It's where there's 2 courses out there, 2 18-hole courses. It's in the Woodlands in North Houston. And the Shell Women's Open, it was one of the 4 majors for the women, was on one of these 218. That it wasn't the Fazio, it was the other one. I can't remember. I think it was National maybe or something, but It was amazing.
That's great.
Absolutely beautiful course. But played golf, then went down to the Gulf and did a little red fishing, talked to some friends down there. And I was curious. I was like, hey, my phone is blowing up with text messages, donate to Allred, he's so close, donate to Allred. And essentially what everyone that I trust down in Texas and politics told me, including my good friend who's the comptroller down there, Glenn Hager, he was like, look, Allred's a better candidate than Beto, but he's still going to lose by 4 or 5 points. And that's kind of the general consensus, is that they think Allred ran a better campaign than Beto. They think Allred was more substance than Beto, and more people could kind of get behind it, but they just don't see it happening.
I mean, Ted Cruz, I lived in Texas in 2018 during that race, and it's hard for me to fathom that Allred's running a better campaign than Beto. I mean, I thought that was Beto at his best. He clearly just got worse as he kept on running and tried to run for president. But 18, I mean, I lived in a neighborhood that Beto got 80% of the vote in my precinct. I lived close to downtown Fort Worth. And so, I was the only one in my neighborhood that didn't have a black and white Beto sign. And it was just a lot of hype. And no matter what Beto did, no matter how much money they spent, Cruz was still going to win by 4 points, no matter what, 3 or 4 points. It's kind of baked in Texas. I just have a tough time believing that Allred can get there. He is a solid candidate. I mean, the Democrats did put forward their best foot there. I mean, they've made the Republicans have to spend a ton of money there. And I mean, I've gotten so many text messages from Ted Cruz. We're going to lose Texas. We're going to lose Texas.
Well, and that, I'm sure, is Cruz just trying to catch up. I mean, Allred outraised him by $26 million.
Right.
I think their deal was they felt like Allred was more personable, believable, and a lot of them felt like, and now these are all Republicans I'm talking to, felt like Beto was more, kind of like, the Messiah candidate or something.
Right.
He could do no wrong and didn't connect with people in the same way that Allred just seems to kind of like every man's man. So
Allred has great political skills. There's no question about that. I just think the demographics of Texas it's still a Republican state. Trump's still going to win by a healthy margin there. So let's go ahead and mark that one red. Jordan, that gets us to 51. And then, if Ohio indeed flips, that's 52. My prediction is 53. I think Wisconsin actually goes, you've got it marked blue here, Jordan, but I actually think Ohio and Wisconsin both go red, and we'll be at 53. Jason probably thinks it'll be a 50-50 tie, would be my guess, of whoever wins the presidency.
We talked about earlier, I still think I could be totally wrong because I'm not paying any attention to Nebraska, but there seems to be folks that believe that this late movement of this independent candidate in Nebraska, might have some swings. So, if you took that one off, my gut tells me it probably ends up somewhere, with Republicans around 51, Dems still at 47, and then a couple of independents in there. So I agree with you though on the premise, Democrats don't keep the Senate. So,
okay. Moving on to the House, I think it's going to be really close. I don't think that either party is going to run away with this. There's more seats that the Democrats have to defend than Republicans. It's hard to track sometimes nationally too, what's going on with so many races. And, race I was working on the other day, Real Clear Politics had it as a safe Democratic seat, and it literally might flip Republican. I mean, we have a really good chance to win in the Toledo area in Ohio. I think we have a good chance in Cincinnati and up in the Akron area as well. So, I think there's just in Ohio alone, there's 3 pickup opportunities that are legit. So
what you're saying is pollsters don't always get it right? Is that
pollsters don't always get it right, and there's sites like this don't always have access to very much polling in these House districts either. There's just not a lot of public polling done in the House races. We witnessed this in Oklahoma in 2018, when Steve Russell, nobody thought that Oklahoma 5, either your congressional district you lived in, nobody thought that seat would flip blue. No. And out of nowhere, Steve Russell loses on election night, kind of shocked everybody with $500,000 in the bank, I believe, that he didn't even spend. That has to be a big time error looking back. But again,
I mean,
sometimes
I think,
there can be surprises in House races
yeah,
on
and
election
Congressman
night.
Russell was probably as unmoved that night as he was every other night. So,
But we're going to have a few of those seats around the country. I think that Republicans will be somewhere around 230 seats. Not enough to really govern. I mean, we're still going to have the same problems. If Republicans have control of the House, Mike Johnson's still going to have a miserable job. He's still going to have the far right that, at any moment can try to vacate the chair. I mean, it's crazy. So
my general
we'll see what
feeling on the
happens.
House is if Harris wins with what I think she will, with the popular vote and the Electoral College, then my prediction is that the House stays Republican and maybe picks up a seat or two. I've got this theory as a sociologist that people inherently seek balance in their lives, whether or not they know they're seeking it or not. And so for the Republican voter, the suburban voter, educated, that says, I'm not doing the Trump experiment again, and like holds their nose and votes Harris, they're still going to vote for the Republican congressman. So it's their like way of balancing. There's, Harris is in the White House, but Republicans control the House and the Senate. So that's kind of my prediction: is House stays red, which, like for Oklahoma is great for Tom Cole and Congresswoman Bice, who are both friends of mine and I think do a wonderful job. So
Yeah, Oklahoma has some great
we punch above
congressional leaders. We do very much. Well, let's get into the presidential race. What do you think are some of the things that the Harris campaign did really well? Like, if you were looking at this now, in your opinion, what did the Harris campaign do the best?
I think some of the things they did best was keep it super simple, not go into too much detail. I know that's a knock on them too, is that they haven't given enough detail. But the fact is Trump gives so much information about everything all the time that that he's constantly making the news cycle for all this, for all the crazy stuff that comes out of his mouth, and they have cover by that, by not going too far in the weeds. I think they definitely tagged on to the Obamas of the whole, like the Obamas were that was the candidate of hope, and Kamala's the candidate of joy. When everyone's talking about how awful politics is and how they hate to talk about politics and they just want it to be over, she's adding that little bit of spark of like happiness where she can into it. I think that's been a plus for them. I think having the Obamas come out and be so supportive has been a plus. And then I think their ground game, and I think it's clear as this thing finishes that they don't want to talk about the economy. They want to talk about women's rights, because they are driving women out to vote. And they are banking a Harris win on suburban educated women that are pro-life, that still believe there should be some abortion rights. And I think they've put everything on that, and we'll see if their ground game is as good as they think it is. I know you talked about money earlier. I mean, they had 3-1 money, and they've put a lot of that into ground game in those swing states targeting female voters.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about things that the Harris campaign did well. I mean, they were flush with cash. I mean, $1 billion raised to Trump's 400 million. I mean, when Trump's getting outspent almost 3-1, when you tie in all the money that's been spent in these elections, all the special interest groups, even though I'm predicting that Donald Trump's going to win in a pretty healthy electoral margin tomorrow, it does give me pause knowing just how much more money the Democrats are spending than the Republicans. And that's not just on the presidential race, it's across the board that we're really getting outspent.
Talked about the all-red seat. I mean, if you look at up and down those Senate seats, like Dems have raised more money. Now, is that because they have more enthusiasm? Is that because their donors are just more willing to give? I mean, I think you could probably say a little bit of both. And we know Trump had to spend half of his money on his legal fees, so
right,
he didn't really have that much left to spend.
I think number one thing the Harris campaign did well is, financial management, just unbelievable fundraising effort. And I agree with you about the Obamas. I mean, I think Barack and Michelle Obama have been rock stars for the Democratic side. And while they absolutely fire up our base, if you will,
Yeah.
Those people in the middle voted for Obama twice. And let's, whether you like Barack Obama or hate Barack Obama, you can't deny the fact that he is a gifted politician. He's an unbelievable orator. He motivates that base. And he's spent a lot of time and effort really hammering young black men to vote for Harris, because Kamala was losing young black men. I mean, there was a point in time where it was looking like 25% of black men under the age of 50 were going to vote for Trump. And even the other day, I saw a national poll from a very trusted pollster, does a lot of work here in Oklahoma, a national poll that had the African-American vote at 16% for Trump, which, if that's the case, it's going to be difficult for Harris to win. And so I think Obama's done a very good job of hammering that at all of his rallies and getting that message out on social media. And, putting some African-American men in a tough spot, because they absolutely love and respect Barack Obama. If you listen to Jalen Hurts, the football player for the Eagles, the way he talked about Obama the other day, there's a lot of respect that they have. So, I mean, I think he's been the most valuable player, if you will, in this campaign for either side. There's nobody that's a better surrogate for their side.
Him coming along early has been really good. And quite frankly, and the thing we haven't said at all, and it's like kind of shocking, it's probably really good for the Harris campaign that Biden disappeared. I mean, nobody's about Biden other than Saturday Night Live, just ribbing Biden every week, which, I'm not going to lie, has been hilarious.
Every time he shows up and says something, it's a gaffe.
Yeah, so
I mean, he gave Trump this garbage comment the other day, right on the heels of the Puerto Rican the comedian that made the joke about Puerto Rico. That gave Trump all kinds of content for a couple of days in fundraising.
Biden generally out of the campaign altogether, not stumping with him, not having him go to swing states, having him go do the most obscure things and just be gone, I think has actually been a plus for the Harris campaign.
I couldn't agree more. Well, let's talk about things that Trump campaign has done well. First and foremost, I think that Trump is at his best when he is free-flowing in a lot of these podcast interviews and things. He has a larger-than-life personality that can cut both ways. I mean, we talked about he's just always saying ridiculous things. Rob and I recorded a podcast the other day. Hasn't come out yet, but I wore an Arnold Palmer shirt just for Rob to try to get him to make a comment. But Rob made a great point. He's like, it was in Rob's mind, all the offensive things that man has said through the years, I kind of thought that was funny. And anybody that was offended by that wasn't voting for Trump in the first place. What he does a good job of is he does motivate his base, and he has an immovable base, and that hasn't changed. And, Corey Lewandowski coined the phrase in 2016 on the campaign when he was the initial campaign manager. He wrote on the whiteboard, "Let Trump be Trump." And I think that that's important to do. And ultimately, there's nobody that's not going to allow Trump to be Trump. It's just who he is. He can't help himself. He's going to be Donald Trump, and he's going to be a larger-than-life figure.
Right.
And, I think the way he handled, even going back to the summer, the way he handled the assassination attempt was helpful to him and setting things up. So I don't know that he's really gained a lot of ground, but he's, in my opinion, has done a pretty good job of drawing a true contrast. And honestly, I think the one television ad that's going to make a difference on Election Day is on the transgender issue. There's a very powerful ad that ran nationally, and it ran in all the swing states, all the battleground states. And it ended with Donald Trump saying, Kamala Harris is for they, them, I'm for you. Yeah. And I think that there's a lot of people, and I told this to Rob a long time ago. I said, look, if the Democratic Party would just lay down this transgender issue a little bit, I think you'd win all the national elections. But it's a step too far for too many people. And I think Trump took advantage of that. The other day he had a sports team that refused to play against a biological male come up on stage. And look, while we both know it's not the biggest widespread issue out there, it's an issue that moves the needle with undecided voters. No question.
Definitely agree with you on the base stuff. I think that moves the needle with the base. I don't know about undecideds. I still, if I had to put the transgender issue for Republicans up as moving the base, like boys and girls sports, or pit that up against Democrats using a woman's right to choose, especially when it comes down to rape and incest, and basically saying you're going to have states that are just not going to allow this for any cause whatsoever. I think the Dems win on that issue of those two, because you just don't see. I mean, we're grasping at straw. Have there been men and women's sports? Yes. Is it ridiculous? Yes. This Democrat thinks it's ridiculous. Like, I've got a son and daughter. They should compete against their own gender. Like, I just don't know why we're even having that conversation. But here in Oklahoma, where a bunch of people have tried to make that an issue, you can't find an instance where it's happened. But you can go find instances where a kid's gotten raped and now may not be able to deal, with that issue in a way that is of their choosing. And I think that's the difference on those two issues. Now, I will say, I'll give Trump this. Trump's baked in the cake. I think you said it best. You got to let Trump be Trump. Mm-hmm. And I think he's done that well this election cycle. I actually think the last couple of months he's done really well to pivot off of all of his legal troubles, instead of like the whole woe is me, look, they're coming after me, look, they're doing this to me, and really hammer on his issues, which are the border and the economy.
Right.
He's, pushing hard on single parents and on fixed income families about, hey, when I was your president, your groceries didn't cost this much.
That's right.
And if I'm your president again, I'm going to help you make sure you can put food on your table. And I think those have been winning issues for him. And I think him pivoting off of his whole like lawsuit troubles and all that stuff, which he was just stuck on forever, and moving more towards talking about real issues for real people's lives, I think that's been a plus for the campaigns. I don't know if it was him doing that or if it was his campaign team that was doing it for him, but I thought those were net positives. If he comes out the winner, I think that will be the reason. Sure. I don't think it'll be it's
real tangible things that he can point to during his presidency.
It'll be an obscure social issue. I think it'll be the economy, and I think it'll be people's fear of either losing their job or having a crime committed against them by someone that they deem as like a citizen that's not legal to be here. And I think he's just hammered that over and over and over this last couple of months. And that's, if he wins, I think that'll be the reason, in my opinion.
Well, you mentioned abortion, though. It is interesting to note how Trump has pivoted on the issue of abortion. Now, Trump's always been pro-choice for the most part.
Yeah.
He played the pro-life game, I believe, in the primaries to do what he did. And he appointed 3 pro-life justices to the Supreme Court, which opened the door for laws that, we probably agree, like in Oklahoma, it went too far without, there's confusion around life of the mother type issues. Like I talked about pregnancies and things of that nature. So I totally get that issue. And I think you're right. I do think Trump has, read the political tea leaves and gone back to where his real personal views are, which are more pro-choice.
Yeah.
And in fact, his wife was on Fox and Friends the other day talking about how she's full-fledged pro-choice. So
I just don't know you'll convince his voters of that. And I don't know that you'll convince undecided voters that you won't.
And that's the thing. Yeah.
It's something more on it. And you've seen, states that have gone so far to take away all of those rights. And that's what, it's the same kind of fear tactic. I mean, we're talking fear tactics here, right? I mean, fear tactics on immigration, fear tactics on abortion. And it's just where does the average voter's emotions come down on one of those issues?
That's right.
And that's where, again, I think Harris' campaign has spent a lot of that money targeting the emotional voter. Well, that sounds terrible. That sounds like women are emotional voters. I don't mean it that way.
No, I know you don't. I know what you're saying. But hey, we all vote on emotions first.
Yeah, the emotions.
None of us vote logically. Even you and I, we think that we do, but at the end of the day, everything is emotional. When I'm running a campaign and putting messaging out there, it's all meant to be emotive in nature.
Yeah.
Just like when Coca-Cola advertises, they're trying to evoke an emotion.
Yeah.
And that's what we do on these campaigns. I mean, there are logical reasons for them, but ultimately, it's so yeah. Every voter's emotional.
Yeah, those are things that I think that he's done well. And again, that's where I come out with, I think at the end of this, it's Harris's to win out there, because Trump, I mean, even the latest polls today were like 47-47, but Trump's just never really gotten over that 47. And you don't have like the obscure independent in this time that can like take a bunch of votes. Like this thing's going to be Harris or Trump. And So
as I'm sitting here in my blue shirt predicting a red wave tomorrow, while I'm predicting Trump, what I told you already that gave me pause is the fact that the money is being outspent. I think when you come down to messaging, I think you can go point for point where Harris probably has an advantage talking about issues like abortion, where Trump has an advantage talking about immigration, the economy, transgender issues, those kind of issues. So, I mean, it kind of is a mixed bag. I think Harris is at a big time disadvantage that she is the sitting vice president, and she is highly unpopular, just like Trump's highly unpopular. And she was the vice president to a sitting president who is unbelievably unpopular and probably not mentally fit to do the job at this point in time. Okay, so that's where it gets interesting. It's like Harris has the money, but Trump has the advantage of not being in office right now and pointing to some tangible things that were done during his presidency that I think he's done a better job of pointing to things he did well in his presidency in 2024 than he did in 2020 in the midst of the pandemic.
Everybody, it may be his campaign team. I mean, I've heard a lot of folks, the friends of mine that are in politics in other states, that talk about how this is the best run Trump campaign of the three of them, and probably with the least amount of money.
And there's been a lot of smart people on all the campaigns and a lot of people that I respect. And look, he's not an easy candidate to manage for anybody. And I don't say that as a degrading comment to Trump. I mean, he's his own man and he's going to do what Trump wants to do.
Yeah.
But let me tell you, Chris LaCivita, that man is smart. He knows what he's doing, and he has a military background, and he's running that campaign very well. The ground game, by every measurable standard, is significantly better for the Republicans this time. It's also telling that we have, in 2020, we had Trump telling people not to vote early, not to vote by mail. And if you look at the early voting numbers throughout the country, we're doing significantly better. Now, I'm not banking on that because I still don't know that we've done enough with college-educated voters to win them over to win the election.
Yeah.
But significantly better with early votes. Susie Wild, I mean, we have some great people on Trump's side working on this campaign. And I do think it's been a much better run campaign than 2020. And that is not taking away from the guys that ran in 2020 because they're very smart too and did a great job. It was just such a weird time in our nation with social and racial unrest and with a global pandemic going on. It just made the campaign, well, for lack of better words, it was a shit show all the way around. And that's why Biden did a great job of staying in the basement. And I believe that's why he won.
Yeah. I mean, and he won. We can break all that down another time, but I think you'll see a state like Georgia that went blue last time go red this time. And I don't think it'll be due to Trump per se. I actually think it'll be due to Governor Kemp, who has a pretty robust ground game that he's used for like Republicans in Georgia. And I think they're trying to make sure they set up Georgia for the next couple cycles for Republicans statewide. And I think that's where, and this gets into the weeds of politics, but some of those states that have switched back and forth, I think the Republicans, if you gave them truth serum, would say they're not Trump people at all. But they want to make sure that Republicans stay in power in those states. And so they're trying to toe that line of like being Trump adjacent, but run their own campaigns and their own statewide stuff to build their own network so that they have that in place no matter what happens in this election. And so I think a state like Georgia probably goes red because of that, because they're building into their governor's race in 2 years and the next Senate races that come up there. And they're trying to do that in spite of Trump, not for Trump, if that makes sense.
Totally. And so, Jordan, let's go ahead and flip Georgia red on our map. And here's the other thing, too. I mean, clearly, you've seen Governor Kemp, who's had a contentious relationship with President Trump through the years. They've really come together. They're campaigning together. I do think Georgia flips red, and for all the reasons that you just said. And also, I mean, just for the simple fact, look how close it was in 2020. You had Trump telling people not to trust the mail-in ballots.
Yeah.
And now we're telling people go ahead and vote early, vote by absentee, do whatever it takes. I think that makes a difference in a race that's going to be decided by a few thousand out of millions of votes cast.
Yeah, it'll still be close.
Yes, I agree.
It'll be within, I would bet Georgia's probably within 60,000 votes.
Right.
But I still think that Republicans there have been doing stuff in spite of Trump to set themselves up for later. So yeah, I agree. I think Georgia goes red. Now,
let's move to Arizona.
yeah,
I believe Arizona goes red. Trump's polling 2 points better in Arizona right now than he was in 2020 at this time. I believe he pulls that out. Like I said earlier, I think Kerry Lake loses the Senate race, but I think Trump wins Arizona. What are your thoughts on Arizona?
well, my good friend is the mayor of Phoenix, and she's still holding out hope that Arizona can stay blue. But Biden and what he did there 4 years ago is just not going to be the same for Harris. I think the fact that the Harris campaign has spent a lot more time up in the blue wall is probably indicative of where they think Arizona may be going. And so I would say I agree with you that I think Arizona goes back red. So, and
Okay.
again, I think it'll be close. I think it'll be, under 100,000 votes probably. But I think Arizona goes red.
Okay, Nevada is a state that I've seen some really strong polling there. I mean, Trump's polling 3 points better in Nevada right now than he was in 2020. When really, I think I was kind of shocked he lost Nevada in 2020. I think that comes back in the red column. But the truth is, when you really look at this math, it doesn't matter. Now, North Carolina is a state, like if Trump wins these Sunbelt states, then Nevada doesn't matter as much.
Nevada, I think, is one that could stay blue. And I know you've seen some more polling on it than I have, but Nevada, unlike some of these other states and their rural population, they have 2 or 3 big cities and then a bunch that it's all in rural and they can kind of wash each other out. I mean, Nevada's like, you got Reno and Vegas and like nothing really in between. And so I think that Dems have been doing a bunch of ground game stuff there, and it's one that they're trying to hold because they felt like that they're giving up Arizona. So let's leave that one off the board for a second.
I agree. And I think you can say the same thing about North Carolina. This is one where there was rumors last week that Kamala Harris pulled $2 million of advertising out of North Carolina, was shifting it elsewhere. I've had other media buyers tell me that there was an untruth in that story and that her media buy was plenty healthy. I am not in the weeds in North Carolina. I don't know, but this is a state that could go either way. I mean, it goes either way.
Well, here's the
I think that Trump is very confident that he's going to win North Carolina and Nevada.
Well, let's be honest. Trump isn't confident he's going to win anything because for the last 2 weeks he's been telling everyone that if he loses, it's because it's rigged. So if he was confident, he wouldn't have been telling everyone that it's already rigged, no matter what happens. But North Carolina, you have 2 factors. You got the guy running for governor.
Cool.
They're LG, and he is a mess.
Hot mess. Big pile of hot mess.
Just big pile of hot mess. So it's so much so that Trump doesn't even want to be close to him, and that should tell you something. So like, where do suburban voters, where do educated voters? You got a lot of like the high tech sector and banking sector that's there in North Carolina. Like, where do those people go on that governor's race? And do they also then go that way with president, or do they just vote for 2 hot messes and move on? So you got that factor. And the other factor is all the storms that came through there and how much is that going to disrupt some of that rural vote. And it doesn't need to disrupt that much. I mean, if it disrupts 20 or 30,000 votes in rural North Carolina, that state could get real close all of a sudden. I don't think it should be. I think it should be in the red column, but I think that the Dems with the Obama effect and then that targeting suburban voters and having a hot pile of mess running for governor, you put North Carolina in play for Democrats.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I mean, it's in play. It went for the Democrats, I believe, in 2020, right? I mean, so did it go red?
Well, Trump won it in 2020. The last Dem to win North Carolina was Obama.
Okay, gotcha. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's definitely going to be close there. All right, so we'll keep North Carolina gray. Let's handle a couple states that are listed as gray, but I don't believe are. Minnesota. Let's put that in the Democratic column. But I want to mention something. That state will be way closer than it should be. Hasn't voted for Republicans since 1972. And every poll I see, Trump's within 5 points. Now, Minnesota's going to stay blue, but that should tell you that Tim Walz was maybe not the greatest pick for vice president, and I don't think that he's been a net positive for Harris.
I said it on the last podcast. You left me
I know. That's right.
Shapiro.
It should have been Shapiro, or Mark Kelly. I mean, look. I don't believe that he's been. I mean, he got his lunch ate by J.D. Vance. I mean, J.D. Vance ran circles around him in that debate. I don't believe that he's been a real attractive candidate for the Democratic side. So I know he's Rob's friend, and I'm sure
got eviscerated with this week's SNL when they had Tim Kaine on there, and they were like, Tim Scott. They're like, no, my name's Kaine. And they're like, oh, yeah, you're just the average white dude. And they put him up next to Walz, and they, like, look the same. They're like, yeah, triple VP candidates. I was like, oh, my God.
Oh, yeah.
Just scorched. Yeah.
All right, so we'll put Minnesota blue, but I'm telling you, that's my shocker for the night, that I would not be totally surprised if that was really close and it doesn't get called early on election night. New Hampshire is going to stay blue, I believe, as well, but it's polling pretty close, so go ahead and make New Hampshire blue. Nebraska, the congressional, just Nebraska 1, whatever that is over there, that's going to stay blue as well.
Yep.
Okay, so now we're dealing with the northern wall, and this is where it all comes down to. I mean, if Trump were to win North Carolina, then he just has to win one of the 3.
Yep.
And the presidency's his.
Or
and that's why
if Harris wins North Carolina and 2 of them, then there.
Right. So, I mean, this is where, while I'm going to say that I think I have it at 312 electoral votes, I'm bullish on Trump doing well tomorrow night. This is where I still have to say it's a coin flip. I mean, like, every one of these states is going to be incredibly close. And I had a Republican friend of mine the other day text to say it's going to be a landslide. And I said to him, I said, Steve, there's no way it can be a landslide, because even if he wins 312 electoral votes, he's going to win by such a small margin in North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Nevada, Arizona. I mean, these states are all going to be close. And I don't think we should be totally surprised if it goes either way tomorrow.
All right, so you put yours up, the remaining ones, you pick yours and get your total, and then
I have them all but Michigan.
All right,
going
so
red.
Add those on for your final total. All right.
Yeah, and 310. So yeah, Michigan I totally believe can go either way. That's a true coin flip. Good. Let's just go and make it red. I'm going to be optimistic and say we'll be at 312.
All right, 312 to 226 is where you have it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I'm going to go. I say Harris wins the blue wall. Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania.
And there's the presidency, if that happens.
Yeah. I think she loses North Carolina in a nail biter, but wins Nevada.
Wins Nevada, okay.
Now, do you believe at all that Iowa is in play with that latest?
No. Iowa's not in play. That was a garbage poll. Iowa's not in play. It's just not. I mean, I just don't believe that it is. I mean, if we're believing that Iowa's in play, then Minnesota and Virginia are both in play. I mean, it's the same kind of situation.
Yeah.
And I think that Virginia, there is a little bit of movement there. I think it'll be interesting to see if it's within 5 points there. I think it's going to be a long night for Harris.
All right, so you got 312. I got 276. What's your over on the popular vote?
I think that Harris wins the popular vote by 1 or 2%, regardless of what the Electoral College is.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't think it'll be a massive
percents. I was going to go with like just how many like million votes do you think? I think Clinton beat Trump by 4 million votes in 2016, and Biden won
was it 6 million or 6 million or
6 million. It was more than Clinton,
right?
By like 6 million in 20. So, throw me out a number of not a percentage.
I think that Trump loses by at least 4 million votes across the country. Yeah. And that's what I'm saying to my friend. It can't be, 312 would be a really solid electoral victory.
Yeah.
But it's not going to be a landslide. I mean, we haven't had a landslide since, I mean, I guess you could say Bill Clinton was a landslide. And I mean, but even the Obama years, those aren't landslides when,
No, it was,
when I think of landslide, I think about Reagan in 80 and 84 and George Bush in 88. Yeah. So we haven't had a landslide in a long time, which tells you something about our politics, is that it's just gotten more and more divisive as you and I have gotten older. When we were children, there was a lot of swing voters. There were people that voted for Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan, right? I mean, that doesn't happen today nearly as much.
Well, it was fun to talk to my son about it because he wanted to know, like, who are you voting for and why? And, I think the lesson that I'm trying to offer to him is that you can register with a party, which he chose not to. He decided to register as independent.
Okay.
But at the end of the day, it's about knowing who you're voting for and why. And so, my ballot will have a little bit of everything on it. And that's because I don't buy into, this kind of zero-sum game that you're all of one team and none of the other. But I think that's what you were just talking about, that we're kind of losing here right now in politics in the country, is that there's going to be 70, 80 million really upset people on Wednesday on one team or the other.
Sure.
They're going to be talking about how the world is ending. And I do a TV show every Sunday morning with my good friend John Eccles, was in the Republican House here, the floor leader. And, we said this Sunday at the end of our program, I was like, we're doing live coverage tomorrow night of the election. And my talking point to those that watch us was, when this thing's over, John and I'll have coffee on Wednesday and we'll still be friends.
That's right.
We'll disagree on how things went, how it went down, but you got to move on to how are you going to make the country better. So whoever wins, I hope that their message the next day or the next week or whenever this thing gets kind of settled out, that their message will be, all right, let's move forward. Let's, make the U.S. the best it can be. So
I hope so. And I think it's really sad to me that the state of affairs in our politics, because it's almost as if you support somebody and you say you're voting for them or you put a sign in your yard or whatever, it's just all automatically assumed that you agree with 100% of everything that person says and does. And that's just not the case. There's oftentimes you might disagree wholeheartedly with more than half of what a candidate stands for, but then the other candidate might be you disagree even more, or there's one key issue that causes you to vote for somebody. And I voted for somebody here that would shock some people, but I think the person's doing an incredible job in really helping move the ball forward on some key things, kind of the way that you did when you were in the House. And so you could probably guess who that is.
You just need some balance.
For sure.
You need some of the other voice in the room, if nothing else, just to have people think about stuff. Because whenever you get too much groupthink, that's not good.
But I will give you an example, we'll close it out on this, of where our politics are at and why I think it's a problem. And I'm working on the mayor's race in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And I don't know exactly how it's going to turn out tomorrow. It's been a really wild race, and it's historic in the city of Tulsa, because we've never had a mayor's race on the same ballot as a presidential in the history of the city.
Yeah,
we've only had nonpartisan elections in Tulsa for a few years, and the two previous nonpartisan mayor's elections did not go to a runoff on the same day as the national general election.
Yeah.
And my candidate is a Democrat. And I chose to work for it because it was a nonpartisan race.
Yeah.
And to me, fixing potholes has nothing to do with red or blue issues. Making sure that we have law enforcement is not a red or blue issue. These are city issues. They're not the same as national issues. And so my candidate, Karen Keith, had incredible poll numbers. She was looking great. And in the last 10 days of the first round, she started getting attacked from the right and attacked from the left. She's getting beat up on both sides, kind of unnecessarily. And she's been a very moderate Democrat. She held a Republican-leaning commission seat in Tulsa County for 16 years. And so her numbers just began to crumble because there's not an appetite right now for bipartisan leadership.
Yeah.
And so now we're in a race with a Democrat who you served with, and Karen, who's a Democrat, and literally because she has Republicans on her campaign team along with Democrats, the Democratic Party pretty much kicked her out and said, you're not welcome here anymore. And all of a sudden she lost all that support, and our support there crumbled. But then the Republicans didn't necessarily, we had to work hard to get them to trust Karen that she's moderate enough and conservative enough on certain issues to be the mayor. When in the reality, the issues facing Tulsa are not the same issues facing our country. We're not going to deal with abortion on the city level.
Yeah.
These are issues that fixing potholes and fixing the permitting process for housing shouldn't be a Democratic or Republican issue. But there we are with this difficult. Are the Republicans? They're not really embracing her. The Democrats kicked her out. So I don't know what's going to happen on election day. I think that we're going to pull it out. I hope, but
the middle is a lonely place, Matt.
It is. It really is. And I don't know how that's going to change, but it needs to change if we're going to fix some of the real problems facing our country. Because a lot of the problems facing our country require comprehensive solutions.
Yeah.
And comprehensive solutions don't go over really well in Republican and Democratic primaries across the country.
It's a lot like my golf game. It requires a lot of comprehensive solutions, and I just can't figure those out right now.
That's right.
But after this is all done and these elections are over, I'm going to go tee it back up, and I'm going to smack it around to the left and to the right.
There you go.
Rarely hit the center.
Well, Jason, I appreciate you joining us tonight and filling in for Rob. I know he'll appreciate that. And thank you for everybody that listens. Follow us on social media. Please subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts. Check us out on YouTube. We're getting a lot more people downloading our videos on YouTube. Please go there. And we just appreciate everybody that's subscribing and leaving comments and engaging with us. And we're going to continue to bring you great content. Jason, thanks for bringing us great content tonight, a great perspective.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, and thanks for Rob letting me pinch hit. I know I didn't swear as much as you do. But as a former pastor, I just can't do that on these settings. So,
and everybody, go vote tomorrow. It's important. If you haven't voted already, go vote, do your civic duty, and don't sit it out and say they're both terrible. Guess what? We're all imperfect. So you're always going to have some terrible people to choose from. So get out there and vote tomorrow. Have a great night. Hey.